I still remember the exact moment my phone buzzed. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of quiet day when the world feels still. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the sunlight filtering through the curtains. When the message came through, I thought it would be a routine text, maybe a reminder from work, or a friend asking to meet up. But when I unlocked my phone, the words staring back at me felt like a knife straight into my chest. Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore. That was it. No explanation. No kindness. No hesitation. Just 6 words from my stepmother that shattered everything I thought I had left. For a moment, I sat frozen. My heart raced, but my hands went cold. Did I read it wrong? Was this some kind of twisted joke? I read it again and again. But the words didn't change. She had done it. She had locked me out of the only home I had. And my father, my own father, had let it happen. I wanted to believe he didn't know. That maybe she had acted on her own, behind his back. But deep down, I knew better. He had been silent for months, watching as she slowly pushed me further and further to the edges of the family. Watching as I became invisible in my own house. And now, I wasn't just invisible. I was erased. I stood up so quickly, my chair scraped against the floor. My mind was spiraling. Where would I go? What would I do? I had a few clothes, a laptop, my phone, but that was it. I didn't even have money saved to fall back on. I dialed my father's number. It rang once, twice, and then went to voicemail. I called again. This time, it didn't even ring. My calls were being declined. That's when the truth settled over me like a storm cloud. I wasn't wanted anymore. Not by my stepmom. Not even by my own blood. And that kind of rejection, it doesn't just sting. It breaks something inside you. I walked outside, numb, clutching my phone in my hand. The streets looked the same. People passed by. Cars honked in the distance. But for me, the world had changed. Everything familiar felt hostile, like I didn't belong anywhere. I couldn't cry. Not yet. The tears were stuck somewhere deep in my chest, boiling, waiting. Instead, I walked faster. My feet carried me without direction, as if moving forward could somehow erase what just happened. But no matter how far I walked, I couldn't outrun those words. Locks changed. You don't have a home anymore. That was the day my life split in two. Before that text, I was the unwanted stepdaughter clinging to a fading sense of family. After that text, I was something else entirely. I didn't know it then, but those 6 cruel words would ignite something inside me. Something sharp. Something dangerous. Something that would grow into the kind of revenge my stepmother would never see coming. And as I walked into that first night of uncertainty, I whispered to myself, not a promise, but a vow. You'll regret this. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But you'll regret the day you tried to erase me. I didn't go home that night. Not because I didn't want to go. Every cell in my body wanted to run back, bang on the door, scream until someone let me in. But what would that have done? I could already picture her face, my stepmother's smirk as she watched me beg. That cruel sparkle in her eyes, the satisfaction of knowing she'd won. And oh, I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I walked, and walked, and walked. By the time the sun went down, I was exhausted. My phone battery was dying, my legs ached, and my stomach twisted from hunger. I had nowhere to go, no plan, no safety net. I ended up at the only place I thought I might find comfort, my best friend's tiny apartment. She opened the door, her eyes wide when she saw me standing there with nothing but my backpack slung over one shoulder. One look at me, and she didn't even ask. She just said, "Come in." I spent the night on her couch, curled up under a thin blanket, staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside her window, but inside, my world felt silent, empty. That first night, it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was humiliating. I was 19, old enough to know hardship, but still young enough to believe that family meant safety. I realized then how naive I had been. In the days that followed, the humiliation only deepened. I didn't have a proper change of clothes, just what I had grabbed before leaving the house that morning. My toothbrush gone. My personal things, photos, journals, keepsakes from my mom trapped behind the locked doors of a house that was no longer mine. I tried calling my father again. His phone was always busy. I sent texts. They were left on read. The silence was louder than any insult. I wanted answers. Why? Why had he let her do this? Why hadn't he fought for me, his own daughter? But every unanswered call chipped away at the hope that maybe, just maybe, he still cared. Each day, I bounced between my friend's couch and the library where I tried to distract myself. I avoided people I knew, terrified they'd ask questions I couldn't answer. Why aren't you at home? How's your family? What would I even say? That my stepmom threw me out like trash? That my dad didn't lift a finger to stop her? I told myself I was being strong, but the truth was, I cried every night, quietly, into the thin pillow, so my friend wouldn't hear. It wasn't just the loss of a home. It was the loss of belonging, of identity. Because when your own family rejects you, who are you? Where do you belong? I thought about my mom a lot during those nights. About how she used to tuck me in, whispering that she'd always protect me. And I hated myself for feeling like she'd left me behind too, even though she was gone long before any of this happened. Some nights, I'd picture my stepmother laughing. Maybe she was sipping wine in the living room that used to feel like mine, legs crossed, relishing her victory. And my dad, sitting quietly beside her, pretending nothing was wrong. That thought burned me alive. But here's the thing about pain: when it festers long enough, it starts to transform. It hardens into something else, something sharper. By the end of that first week, I wasn't just broken. I was angry. And I swore to myself, if they thought they'd erased me, they were wrong. I might have been exiled. But exile has a strange way of teaching you who you really are. And one day, I promised myself I'd walk back into that house, or maybe not that house, but into their lives, and they wouldn't recognize me, not as the broken girl who slept on a friend's couch, but as someone stronger, someone untouchable, the kind of woman who didn't just survive betrayal, but made those who betrayed her regret it. Lying awake on that couch, night after night, I kept replaying everything that had led me here. It hadn't been sudden, not really. That text, the locked doors, it was just the final blow. The truth was, the war had been going on for years. When my mom passed away, I was 13. I remember clinging to my father like he was the last piece of safety in my world. He promised me we'd get through it together, that he'd always protect me. I believed him. Of course I did. I was just a kid, desperate to believe in something. But then she came. My stepmother arrived in our lives like a storm pretending to be sunshine. At first, she was all smiles and soft words. She brought me little gifts, cooked meals I didn't ask for, and called me sweetheart in a voice that sounded almost convincing. Almost. But it didn't take long for me to see the cracks. Behind the smiles, there were sharp eyes always watching. Behind the sweet words, there was a current of competition. Like she needed to prove she was more important than me, and slowly, she began her game. It started small. A joke here, a comment there. You're so much like your mother, it must be hard for your dad to see, or maybe you should give your father and me some space. At first, Dad brushed it off. He'd laugh, kiss my forehead, remind me that nothing could come between us. But over time, her words dripped like poison. Steady and deliberate, she knew exactly what she was doing. She started controlling little things: how we spent holidays, who sat where at dinner, even what shows we watched on TV. And each time, Dad gave in just a little more. At first, it was compromise. Then it became habit. Then, it became normal, and me. I went from being his daughter, his partner in grief, to being the extra. The inconvenient reminder of a life he used to have. I remember one night, God, I'll never forget it. I had a photo of my mom on the mantel. A small frame. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. One day, I came home and it was gone. When I asked, my stepmom just shrugged. Oh, I put it away. It didn't match, the decor didn't match. My mother wasn't decor. But when I looked at my dad for support, he just lowered his eyes and said nothing. That silence, it cut deeper than her cruelty. Over the years, there were countless moments like that. My things disappearing. My voice ignored at the dinner table. Vacations planned without me. Every time I tried to fight back, she twisted into me being difficult or ungrateful, and Dad, he started believing her. Or maybe he just didn't want to deal with the conflict. I stopped being his little girl. I became a problem. And now, here I was years later, locked out, exiled, tossed aside like trash. And it wasn't just her doing. No, it was his silence, his weakness, that hurt most of all. Because betrayal from an enemy, you can brace yourself for. But betrayal from your own father, that's the kind of wound that never really heals. The more I thought about it, the more I realized. This wasn't just about her. It never had been. She might have sent the text, but he was the reason it cut so deep. He was supposed to protect me. Instead, he handed me over to the wolves, and maybe that was the cruelest injustice of all. People think hitting rock bottom happens all at once. Like one moment you're standing, and the next you've fallen straight into darkness. But that's not how it really works. At least, not for me. For me, rock bottom was slow. A series of small humiliations that stacked one on top of the other. Until the weight crushed me. The first came when my friend, as kind as she was, gently hinted that her roommate was uncomfortable with me staying too long. I didn't blame them. I wasn't paying rent, and the couch wasn't meant to be a bed forever. Still, hearing the words, maybe you should start figuring something out, stabbed like a reminder of how unwanted I'd become. So, I packed what little I had and drifted. Sometimes I stayed with classmates. Sometimes I found myself in cheap motels when I had just enough cash. And sometimes I slept in the library, pretending I'd just fallen asleep studying. The second humiliation came when I lost my part-time job. I had been working at a small CAF, the kind where customers barely looked at you as you poured their coffee. But one day, after showing up late, too exhausted from another sleepless night on someone's couch, the manager pulled me aside. "You're distracted, unreliable. We need someone consistent." And just like that, I was replaced. No job, no home, no family. I told myself I'd be okay. I told myself I could handle it. But the truth, I was drowning. I remember one night in particular it's burned into me. I was sitting on a park bench, shivering under a thin jacket, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder if you'll ever feel warm again. I hadn't eaten all day. My phone battery was dead. I was alone, invisible to the world around me, and for the first time in my life, I thought about giving up. Not in some dramatic way, not in a way that anyone would even notice. But in that moment, I thought maybe it would be easier if I just stopped trying. If I just disappeared. The thought terrified me. Not because of the idea of death itself, but because of how easy it felt. How tempting it was to just let go. I sat there, staring at the dark sky, tears streaming silently down my face, and I whispered to myself, why wasn't I enough? Why didn't they want me? And no answer came. Just silence. That was the moment, the true bottom. Not the couch, not the job loss, not even the hunger. The true rock bottom was the emptiness. The feeling that I was nothing. That maybe my stepmom had been right all along, and my father's silence was proof. I curled into myself, pulling my knees to my chest, and for the first time since it all began, I let myself cry. Really cry. Not the quiet tears into a pillow, not the hidden sniffles in a library corner, but full aching sobs that shook my body and made my chest hurt. It was ugly. It was raw. And it felt endless. But here's the thing about rock bottom. Once you're there, there's nowhere left to fall. And though I didn't know it yet, something was about to shift. Because sometimes, when you're at your weakest, the universe places something or someone in your path. Something that reminds you that you're not done. Not yet. And that reminder was coming for me. The spark that would drag me out of the darkness. The flicker of strength that would grow into fire. But at that moment, on that cold park bench, I didn't know any of that. All I knew was pain. And all I could feel was the vow forming again, stronger this time, etched deep into my soul. They wanted me erased, forgotten. But if I survived this, they'd remember me forever. The morning after that night on the park bench, I woke up stiff, cold and hollow. My body ached, my eyes burned, and my mind was buzzing with one thought: I can't keep living like this. I dragged myself to the nearest CAF. Not because I could afford anything, but because I needed a place to sit indoors. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a small black coffee, and sat in the corner, clutching the cup like it was the only warmth left in the world. That's when she walked in. Not my stepmother. Not anyone connected to my old life. Just someone who noticed me. Her name was Clara. An older woman, maybe in her 50s, with kind eyes, and a presence that felt steady, grounded. She was a regular at the CAF, the type of person everyone seemed to know. I must have looked a wreck, because she stopped at my table and asked, gently, "Are you all right, dear?" I don't know why, but the question broke something in me. Nobody had asked me if I was all right in so long. Not my father. Not anyone. I tried to brush it off, to fake a smile, but the tears welled up again. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything: the text, the locks, the exile, the park bench. She listened. Really listened. No judgment, no pity. Just quiet understanding. And when I finished, she said something I'll never forget. Sometimes, life strips us down to nothing, not to destroy us, but to force us to rebuild. And when we rebuild, we become stronger than we ever imagined. Those words lit something inside me. A flicker. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Clara didn't hand me money or offer to solve my problems. What she gave me was far more valuable perspective. She reminded me that I wasn't powerless, even if it felt like it. She reminded me that I had the ability to rise, if I chose to. That same day, I went to the library not to hide, but to plan. I sat in front of a computer, opened a blank document, and wrote at the top, Step 1. Survive. Step 2. Rebuild. Step 3. Rise. It was laughable, almost pathetic. I had no job, no home, no family, and yet I was writing some kind of battle plan like I was a general preparing for war. But that list, it gave me direction. It gave me something to hold onto. So I started small. I applied for every job I could find: restaurants, retail, even night shifts no one else wanted. I sold a few of my old textbooks for cash. I stopped seeing myself as a victim of exile and started seeing myself as someone who was training, because that's what it felt like. Every rejection, every long night, every tear, it wasn't the end anymore. It was training, fuel, and as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. The humiliation didn't sting as sharply. The loneliness didn't crush me as completely. And slowly, brick by brick, I began to rebuild. I knew one thing for certain: my revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be petty. I wasn't going to scream at my stepmother or beg my father to choose me. No. My revenge was going to be silent, powerful, the kind that makes people choke on their own regret, because one day, I'd walk back into the world not as the broken girl they tossed aside, but as someone they could never touch again. That was the promise I made to myself. And for the first time since the text, I believed I could keep it. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's building yourself in the shadows, while the people who hurt you think you've disappeared. That's what I decided. If my stepmother wanted me erased, then my greatest weapon was to become unforgettable. Not to her. Not even to my father. But to myself. It started with work. After dozens of rejections, I finally landed a job at a small diner. Not glamorous, not easy, but steady. The hours were long, the pay barely enough to cover food, and a cheap room I eventually found to rent, but it was mine. I woke up every day tired, but I carried a fire inside me. Every spilled coffee, every rude customer, every sore muscle, I treated it like fuel. Because I wasn't just serving tables. I was training. Training for a life where I would never again be at anyone's mercy. While others laughed on breaks, I studied. I used the diner's free Wi-Fi to watch tutorials, read articles, and learn skills people said were out of my league. I took free online courses, anything I could get my hands on. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew where I wasn't staying, and all the while, I kept silent. I didn't call my father again. I didn't text my stepmother. I didn't post my struggles on social media. To the world, including them, I had vanished, but vanishing has power. It makes people curious. It makes them wonder, and though I tried not to think about it, part of me hoped my stepmother was wondering. Hoped she was asking herself, where did she go? Is she suffering? Did I win? Let her wonder. Because one day, she'd find out. Months passed. My hands grew calloused, my body stronger, my mind sharper. I saved every penny I could, resisting every temptation. While other people my age spent money on clothes or nights out, I hoarded my savings like a dragon guarding treasure, because I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. Then something happened that made the fire burn hotter. One night, as I was closing the diner, I saw them, my father and stepmother, walking down the street. She was clinging to his arm, her voice shrill with laughter. He looked older, tired, but he forced a smile. They didn't see me, but I saw them. And instead of running or hiding, I just stood there watching. For a moment, I felt the old pain rise up, the urge to scream, to demand answers. But then something surprising washed over me. Calm, because as I looked at them, I realized something. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was nothing. But there I was, standing on my own 2 feet, working, surviving, building, and they had no idea. There was the sweetest revenge of all: the silence, the invisibility, the patience. I walked back inside the diner, locked the door, and whispered to myself, "Not yet, but soon." Silence is a weapon, but so is knowledge. And little by little, the universe began to hand me pieces of the truth. It started innocently enough. One evening at the diner, a couple of regulars were gossiping at the counter. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard a name, my stepmother's name. My heart stilled, my ears sharpened. They didn't know who I was. To them, I was just another waitress refilling coffee cups. But their words stuck with me. "She's always flashing money, but trust me, people like that are drowning in debt. I heard her husband's business is barely hanging on. Without her, he'd already be broke." I nearly spilled the coffee pot. Debt. My father's business in trouble. That didn't fit the picture my stepmother painted: the glamorous clothes, the fancy dinners, the vacations she posted online. And for the first time, I wondered, what if her entire life was built on lies? From then on, I paid attention. Whenever I heard her name, whenever I saw someone connected to her, I listened. I scrolled quietly through social media, piecing together clues she thought no one would notice, and slowly, the cracks widened. There were posts about missed payments, whispers of her flirting a little too closely with a business partner, photos tagged by acquaintances that she quickly untagged herself from, photos that told a different story from the one she curated online. The image of her perfect life began to crumble in my mind. And with it, my father's silence made more sense. Because maybe he wasn't just weak. Maybe he was trapped. Maybe she had spun a web so tight around him that he couldn't even see daylight anymore. But knowing that didn't soften my anger. No, it sharpened it. Because if she was lying, if she was draining him, if she was building her power on manipulation and deceit, then one day, that power would collapse. And I would be there to watch it burn. I started keeping notes, literal notes, scribbled in a cheap notebook I carried everywhere. Dates, rumors, patterns, inconsistencies. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that she wasn't untouchable. And the more I uncovered, the less she looked like the monster in my nightmares. She wasn't invincible. She wasn't all-powerful. She was human, flawed, fragile, and one day, breakable. That night, as I closed my notebook, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. I whispered to myself, she built her life on lies. And lies always collapse. I don't even have to destroy her, she'll destroy herself. All I have to do is rise high enough to watch. And in that moment, I realized something important. Revenge didn't have to mean striking first. Sometimes, the real revenge was being patient enough to let your enemy's mask slip on its own. And making sure you're standing tall when it does. Life has a way of circling back. You think you've left the past behind, and then suddenly, it shows up at your door, weaker than you remember, begging not for forgiveness, but for help.it started with a whisper, a rumor I overheard while serving tables at the diner. Someone mentioned my father's name, his business was collapsing. Contracts lost, debts piling high. People said he was drowning, barely keeping his head above water. At first, I didn't want to believe it. A part of me still pictured him as strong, steady, the father who once promised me nothing would break us. But the truth had been obvious for years, hadn't it? He was silent not because he didn't see, but because he was too weak to fight. Then came the second blow, his health. A mutual acquaintance, I don't even know how she recognized me, leaned across the counter one night and said softly, "I'm so sorry to hear about your dad's condition." I froze. Condition? She went on. "I heard he's been in and out of doctors' offices. He doesn't look well at all." And just like that, the image of him smiling beside my stepmother, pretending all was fine, shattered. He wasn't fine. He hadn't been fine in a long time. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to bury myself in work, in my plans, in the fragile stability I had built. But blood is a stubborn thing. And no matter how deeply his silence had cut me, some part of me still cared. Some part of me still wanted answers. So one evening, I walked past the house I once called mine. The curtains were drawn, but even from outside, I could see the change. The yard was unkempt, weeds growing where my mother's roses used to bloom. The lights inside were dim, not glowing with warmth but flickering like shadows of the life that used to exist. And then I saw her, my stepmother, standing at the window, phone in hand, pacing. Her face wasn't smug this time. It was tight, drawn, worried. The mask was cracking. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't just pain or anger. I felt power, because suddenly, the tables had turned. She was the one afraid. She was the one losing control. And my father, my silent, complicit father, was paying the price for the life he had chosen. I should have felt pity, maybe even compassion. But instead, I felt the faintest smile curve on my lips. Because for the first time since she texted me those words, locks changed. "You don't have a home anymore," I realized. The home she stole from me was already slipping from her hands, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Still, I couldn't stay away forever. Because as much as I told myself I was indifferent, as much as I pretended I didn't care, I knew I would have to face them again. Not as the broken girl exiled onto a park bench, but as the woman I had become. The turning point wasn't just theirs. It was mine. Because I finally saw what revenge really looked like. Not destruction, not screaming, not burning bridges. Revenge was walking back into their lives, unshaken, untouchable. Revenge was letting them see that I had risen from the ashes they left me in. Revenge was power, and for the first time, I was ready to claim it. The first time I walked back into the world, I didn't announce it. No dramatic knock, no angry speech, no demand for acknowledgement. I simply walked into the same charity gala my stepmother had posted about for years, the one she loved to flaunt as proof of her status. I wasn't a guest clinging to the shadows this time. I was on the guest list. I had earned my place. The years of working 2 jobs, of saving every penny, of refusing to crumble, they had led me here. I had built a reputation of my own, quietly, steadily, until doors began to open. Doors that no one could shut in my face anymore. And when I entered that room, heads turned. Not because of who I once was, the forgotten daughter, the girl cast aside, but because of who I had become. I spotted her almost instantly. My stepmother, standing near the champagne table, laughing a little too loudly, her makeup hiding the exhaustion she carried now. When her eyes landed on me, the laughter froze in her throat. For the first time, I saw something I never thought I'd see in her face. Fear. I didn't need to speak to her. I didn't need to remind her of the night she locked me out of my own home, of the cruel text she had sent that still lingered in my memory. My very presence was enough. She had tried to erase me. But here I was, flourishing, thriving, proof that she had failed. Later that night, I caught a glimpse of my father. He looked older, smaller somehow, like the years had taken more from him than time should. Our eyes met, and for a brief second, his lips parted as if he wanted to say something. But I walked past him. Not out of cruelty, out of strength, because I no longer needed his words. I no longer needed his validation. The girl who once begged him to stand by her was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes family isn't who you're born to. Sometimes family is the one you build when the world tries to tear you apart, and that was the revenge, not money, not scandal, not even watching their lives crumble piece by piece. The real revenge was that they couldn't touch me anymore. The real revenge was the success they could never claim credit for. The real revenge was walking into that room and knowing deep down they had lost me forever. And I was better without them. When I left the gala that night, the air felt different, lighter, as if I had finally shed the weight of every cruel word, every silent betrayal, every locked door. My stepmother had taken my home, but I had taken something greater, my freedom, my power, my future, and that is a home no one can ever steal from me again. The last time I saw them, it wasn't in anger. It wasn't in tears. It wasn't even in triumph, though inside, I knew how far I had come. It was quiet, calm, powerful. I didn't need to confront my stepmother about the locks, about the stolen years, or the cruel texts. I didn't need to argue with my father for his silence, because I had already won. The victory wasn't in revenge the way most people imagine it. It wasn't in breaking them, exposing them, or forcing them to beg for forgiveness. It was in me. I had survived the betrayal. I had rebuilt my life from nothing. I had become someone they could never erase. Someone whose existence was a testament to strength, patience, and resilience. And in that realization, I felt something unexpected: peace. I let go of the anger that had fueled me for years. I let go of the desire for them to suffer. I let go of the haunting memories that once threatened to drown me, because I didn't need them anymore. I never had. I walked into my own life, fully, without looking back. The pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, they were part of me, yes. But they were no longer the chains that bound me. They were the fire that forged me, and now I live for myself. I live for the girl who once cried on a park bench, for the teenager who felt invisible, for the woman who learned that the sweetest revenge isn't to hurt those who wronged you, it's to rise above them. Untouchable, unstoppable, and undeniably free. So, if you've ever been thrown out, ignored, or made to feel small by the people who were supposed to love you, listen carefully. The real revenge isn't in screaming, plotting, or chasing them down. It's in becoming the person they thought you'd never be. It's in taking every ounce of pain, every rejection, every betrayal, and using it to build yourself so high that they can never reach you. Because when you rise, you win, and the world will never forget your name. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment revenge so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know Well, are you watching form? What do you want to hear from us in next video? If you have any incident in your life, please let us know. We would love to share your story.